The competitive negotiation style is characterized by a high focus on one's own interests and achieving the best possible result for one's own side. The negotiating partners often view each other as opponents with whom one fights for limited resources. A competitive negotiation style is often used when the negotiating partners pursue different goals and the interests are only partially compatible. Furthermore, negotiators follow this style when they assume that the pie is fixed, that is to say, there is just one issue that we are negotiating over. If the pie is split, then either evenly or to a party's disadvantage. When following this strategy, you can gain more from a negotiation, albeit in the short term. However, this negotiation style can also lead to a loss of mutual trust and, in the long run, to a deterioration of the relationship between the negotiating partners. This video will take a closer look at this negotiation style. A competitive negotiation is one in which the negotiating partners pursue different goals and compete with each other for limited resources or advantages. In this style of negotiation, a tough and independent negotiating style is often favored, with each negotiator trying to get the best possible outcome for themselves, even if this may be at the expense of the other. Competitive negotiations are often characterized by high conflict potential and stress, as each negotiating partner wants to defend its position and assert its interests. In this type of negotiation, brutal bargaining tactics are often used, such as setting ultimatums, threats or refusing to make concessions. Competitive bargaining can occur in various contexts, such as business negotiations, with employee representatives regarding working conditions, or even negotiations on political or diplomatic matters. In some cases, however, adopting a cooperative negotiation style may be more appropriate, where the negotiating partners work together to achieve common goals. Some negotiators need to realize the collaborative potential many situations offer. Here are some reasons why one might be competitive in negotiations. Negotiators like to ensure that their interests and needs are considered. Therefore, a competitive negotiation style can ensure one's interests are better represented and protected. Being competitive can achieve the best possible outcome for one's side. By negotiating hard and applying pressure, concessions and compromises can be achieved that would otherwise not be possible. In certain industries or situations, a high level of competitive pressure makes it difficult to make concessions or negotiate cooperatively. In these cases, it may be necessary to adopt a competitive negotiation style to compete. However, it should be noted that a competitive negotiation style is only sometimes the best choice. If you want to build a long-term relationship in a negotiation or if complex problems are at stake, negotiating cooperatively may make more sense. We advise adapting your negotiation style to the specific conditions and objectives of the negotiation. A successful negotiation requires thorough preparation and planning. First, prepare for the negotiation by identifying each side's goals and needs, examining the other side's position and interests and playing out possible solutions. Besides this, fact-finding, developing alternatives, preparing your team and adding to the so-called negotiation pie are further vital activities. Knowledge is power, and so the better equipped you are, the more successful your negotiation can be. Clear and effective communication is crucial for a successful negotiation. You, as a negotiator, should communicate your position and arguments clearly and convincingly to win the other side's agreement. In addition, having your team and stakeholders on your side and communicating transparently with them can also give you a competitive advantage. You need to be able to think strategically and consider the implications of your decisions. Keep in mind the goals and needs of your party side, but also consider the long-term impact of the agreement on the relationship with the other side. Competitive negotiators generally portray a high level of confidence and self-assurance in negotiation. They are clear in their position and aren't intimidated easily by the other side. Self-confidence is easily spoken about but only sometimes easily achieved. Our negotiation training can help you with this. Negotiations can often be emotional. Strong, competitive negotiators should be able to control themselves and remain factual to negotiate effectively. Consider practicing the so-called poker face, so that others can't read your emotions or what you are thinking. These are just some important skills to succeed as a competitive negotiator. However, it is essential to note that negotiation is a complex skill, and each has its challenges and requirements. Excessive competitiveness can be both a blessing and a curse for those who display it. On the one hand, it can spur people to excel and achieve their goals. But on the other hand, it can lead to negative consequences, such as difficulties in negotiating and maintaining healthy interpersonal relationships. Suppose everyone thinks only of their advantage and puts their interests above those of others. In that case, it can be difficult to achieve cooperation or collaboration. This can lead to problems, especially in groups or teams where cooperation is necessary to achieve a common goal. When those involved are only concerned with maximizing their advantage, this can lead to innovative or creative solutions to the problem needing to be identified or implemented. However, creativity and flexibility are often necessary to conduct a successful negotiation and find a mutually acceptable solution. Excessive competitiveness can lead to poor interpersonal relationships. For example, suppose everyone is only concerned about outdoing or outperforming others. In that case, this can lead to negotiations becoming personal and interpersonal relationships being affected. Excessive competitiveness can also lead to the loss of future opportunities and cooperation. On the other hand, if one side negotiates too aggressively or is cooperative, future cooperation or business opportunities may be recovered. We want to note here that it is vital for negotiators to find a balance between competitiveness and cooperation to have a successful negotiation and find a win-win solution that benefits both sides. Here are some tactics commonly used by competitive negotiators. Competitive negotiators often make high demands to widen the negotiating space and get more concessions from the other side. But, unfortunately, these are often termed as high or lowball offers. By threatening negative consequences or ultimatums, such as breaking off negotiations or leaving the negotiating table, competitive negotiators can pressure the other side and strengthen their position. Competitive negotiators often withhold information to strengthen their negotiating position and pressure the other side into an unfavorable deal. Competitive negotiators can intimidate the other side and strengthen their negotiating position through aggressive behavior or other tactics such as personality attacks. Competitive negotiators often create time pressure to push the other side to conclude negotiations quickly and strengthen their position. Some of these tactics may be unethical or unprofessional. Therefore, we don't necessarily advise you to do these if you want to be a successful negotiator aiming for collaborative results. Let us look at some examples of competitive bargaining in practice. In collective bargaining, unions and employers often use a competitive bargaining style to advance their interests and conclude the most favorable agreement possible. Here, high demands are made, and both parties come out fighting, at least, that is the appearance they want to make to the public and, more importantly, their stakeholders. Trade negotiations are often about concluding agreements regulating trade between nations. Negotiators often use a competitive negotiating style to negotiate the most favorable terms for their country. One example is the trade conflict between the USA and China, which has been ongoing since 2018. Various tariffs and sanctions, that is to say punishments and limitations of free trade, are typical strategies here. Takeover negotiations between companies often involve purchasing or selling companies or parts of companies. Here, negotiators often use a competitive negotiation style to negotiate the most advantageous price or deal possible. A concrete example of this is Disney's acquisition of 21st Century Fox. In December 2017, Disney announced it would buy Fox for $52.4 billion. However, other companies were also interested in Fox, such as Comcast. In this case, Disney and Comcast used a competitive negotiating style to acquire 21st Century Fox. Both companies used various tactics to strengthen their negotiating position and eliminate the competitor. For example, Disney has attempted to increase Fox's value by bidding higher, undermining Comcast's interest. Comcast, in turn, has tried to gain a stronger negotiating position by working with other companies, such as Charter Communications. Overall, Disney ultimately won out over 21st Century Fox because it had submitted a higher bid and presented a better plan for Fox's future. A competitive negotiation is a strategic approach to achieving the best possible outcome for oneself, even if this is at the other party's expense. This style of negotiation has both its advantages and disadvantages. On the one hand, by adopting a competitive stance, one can maximize one's gain in a negotiation. On the other hand, however, this strategy can also be too long to damage the relationship between the parties. Therefore, it is crucial to carefully weigh the pros and cons before choosing a competitive negotiation style. When considering a competitive approach, it is important to assess how this might affect the overall outcome of the negotiation, both in terms of short-term gains and long-term relationships. However, the negotiation is highly contentious or becomes overly hostile. In that case, this can damage the relationship between the two parties and make future negotiations more difficult. Ultimately, competitive negotiation should be used cautiously because it brings both risks and benefits. It is, therefore, important to carefully weigh the advantages and disadvantages of this approach before deciding whether or not to use a competitive negotiation style.